The city of New York is sinking. New research says the combination of massive skyscrapers and sea level rise could make the city more prone to natural disasters.
New York City is sinking, and it's not just a slow-motion disaster. It's partly due to the sheer weight of its skyscrapers. This alarming new research reveals a ticking time bomb beneath the city that never sleeps. The Big Apple is subsiding by about 1 to 2 millimeters each year on average, some areas sinking twice as fast. Think that's bad? It gets worse. The city's descent is magnifying the already terrifying threat of sea level rise. As global warming melts glaciers and expands seawater, New York's waters have climbed by about 9 inches since 1950. By the end of the century, major flooding events could be up to 4 times more frequent due to this combination of sea level rise and stronger hurricanes caused by climate change. But New York has a plan to stop this. Keep watching to find out what it is. Rising sea levels are bad news for many cities, and New York City's feeling the impact. The metropolis is sinking by about 1 to 2 millimeters a year, increasing its flood risk. With rising sea levels and a sinking city, the threat becomes even more severe, especially with the weight of Manhattan's skyscrapers amplifying the effect. New York City has over 1 million buildings, and the skyscrapers are particularly heavy, weighing 1.5 to 2 tons per cubic meter. The Empire State Building, made of steel, granite, and limestone, weighs about 370,000 tons. This weight isn't a problem on bedrock, but near the coast on softer ground, it contributes to sinking. Geophysicist Tom Parsons and his team estimate that the city's buildings weigh about 764 million tons. Different surface types in the city respond differently to this weight. Clay soils with artificial fills, common in Brooklyn, yield slightly, leading to subsidence of 7.5 to 60 centimeters. Other soils experience less subsidence, and rock-based areas see as little as half a centimeter. The scientific team warns against ignoring the double threat of sinking soil and rising sea levels. Since 1950, New York's coastal water levels have risen by about 23 centimeters. The east coast of the U.S. faces a particularly high risk from rising sea levels. Hurricanes frequently cause flooding, as seen with Hurricane Ida in 2021, which overwhelmed New York City's drainage systems. Frequent contact with salt water weakens materials like concrete and steel. Other problems include a lack of floodplain standards, additional sinking due to groundwater extraction, and a lack of sediment in New York Harbor. Sediment from the East River and Harlem River used to protect the city from strong northeast winds and hurricanes. Lower Manhattan's particularly at risk, with its southern tip only 1 to 2 meters above sea level. In October 2012, Hurricane Sandy caused over $70 billion in damages, mostly from flooding. In Rockaway Beach, homes were not only flooded but also caught fire, destroying 200 homes in Breezy Point. Since then, a $1 billion federally funded program has fortified 9 miles of Rockaway's Atlantic-facing beach. The boardwalk was rebuilt in concrete to double its flood protection. Quarry stone groins were added to break the waves, and sand dunes were underpinned with a stone-filled trench and concrete wall. However, the bay side of Rockaway Beach has not received as much attention. If another storm like Sandy occurs, it could cause severe drainage from the other direction. A recent proposal by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has allocated a staggering $52 billion to protect the New York region from future storms. The plan includes a system of sea barriers and gates across the mouths of major bays and inlets along New York Harbor, and a seawall encircling Manhattan to barricade the island against the harbor that has long defined its identity. If all goes smoothly, construction on the barriers could kick off as soon as 2030, with an expected date of completion in 2044. However, critics argue that the cost analysis used by state and federal governments skewed toward protecting property rather than maximizing protection for the largest number of people, regardless of their economic status. For instance, a $1 billion plan to protect part of Lower Manhattan would provide direct flood protection to just 62 condominium and rental buildings, 21 commercial properties, and 19 public buildings. So, what's the best solution that'll actually solve this problem? The Asser Levee renovation, completed in 2022, is part of the East Side Coastal Resiliency, the largest urban resiliency project currently underway in the U.S. Over the next 3 years, at a total cost of $1.8 billion, ESCR will reshape 2.5 miles of Lower Manhattan shoreline. But ESCR is just one piece of a much larger $2.7 billion initiative called the Big U, a series of contiguous flood resilience projects that run from Asser Levee near 25th Street around the southern tip of Manhattan and up to Battery Park City along the Hudson. When finished, the Big U will create 5.5 miles of new park space designed to protect over 60,000 residents and billions of dollars in real estate from sea level rise and storm surges. Residents of public housing rely on a narrow park to buffer their homes from a river that's already risen 8 inches. The Big U was conceived after 2012 Superstorm Sandy, which flooded 17% of New York City and caused $19 billion of damage. Like Hurricane Katrina back in '05, Sandy pushed New York and other flood-prone coastal U.S. cities, including Boston, Norfolk, Charleston, Miami, and San Francisco, to embrace the Dutch concept of living with water, which emphasizes building infrastructure that can both repel and absorb water while also providing recreational and open space. In New York, ESCR, like any large infrastructure project in a densely populated area, has faced many challenges. Despite this, significant progress is being made. The ESCR project area covers a flood-prone wedge of Manhattan's natural topography, a pinch point between two higher stretches of shoreline. 400 years ago, when the island was inhabited by the Lenni Lenape, this shoreline was woods and marsh that never rose more than a few feet above sea level. Tidal creeks drained from the uplands, dense with American chestnut, aster, and goldenrod, winding through Spartan meadows to the river. Today, that landscape's buried beneath 4 public housing complexes whose roughly 10,000 residents depend on East River Park to protect their homes from a waterway that's risen 8 inches since the mid-20th century. The East Side Coastal Resilience ESCR project is the first segment of the Big U to get started, and it hasn't been an easy ride. From debates about its final design to budget cuts and new concerns about climate change risks, including this year's extreme rain events, the path has been rocky. The original 2014 design aimed to preserve East River Park's running track, tennis courts, and shady groves of pine oak and cherry trees. But in 2018, Mayor Bill de Blasio's administration quietly changed the plan. They argued it'd be faster and cheaper to clear the park, raise the landscape with over 1 million tons of fill, and then rebuild on top. Under the permeable buffers championed by the Dutch, the raised park would act more like a hard barrier. While some opposed the redesign, many residents of the public housing complexes, which are at high risk of flooding, support it. In fall 2021, demolition crews began their work. The new park, with its pathways and vegetation beds, will act as a berm to keep water out of the city streets. Right now, a fence divides East River Park in half. In the southern section, new steel sheet piles stand at the water's edge, about 8 feet above the original grade. The height can protect the adjacent city streets from a once-in-100-year storm like Sandy. Massive excavators are raising the park's elevation with fill from quarries to upstate New York. Once completed, the park will feature pathways and vegetation beds winding around sports fields, an amphitheater, and playgrounds, creating a terrace landscape that'll keep water out of city streets. More flood walls and retractable gates will run the park's length and extend into surrounding streets, upgrading old infrastructure to prevent stormwater from mixing with wastewater during floods. North of the fence, construction is almost complete at the Stuyvesant Cove Park, a narrow quarter-mile strip of land just south of Asser Levy Playground. Though the park may lack the original design's rain gardens and water-absorbent features, Stuyvesant Cove stays true to another Dutch principle, blending hard infrastructure into the landscape. Walking and biking paths wind through garden beds planted with salt-tolerant native plants like viburnum, wild cherry, and milkweed. The park's concrete flood wall and 2 retractable steel floodgates, one 42 feet long and the other 77 feet long, seamlessly blend with the rising topography. Other segments of the Big U are also in progress. At the Battery, the southern tip of the city, the waterfront's being elevated with fill. Next, they'll install flood walls, higher capacity drainage, and new park spaces. Similar projects to protect the historic South Street Seaport area and the financial district are still in the planning and design stages. Once completed, the Big U will safeguard the financial district, a hub of global economic activity, and tens of thousands of New York's most vulnerable residents. In other boroughs, there's even been more progress. On Staten Island, the Living Breakwaters project, another winner of the Rebuild by Design competition, is on track for completion next year. This project features a network of breakwaters off Staten Island's southern tip to reduce wave action and provide habitat for marine life. The state's also bought and removed homes on Staten Island's shore to allow for periodic flooding. In Queens at Rockaway Beach, a steel-reinforced concrete boardwalk has replaced the wooden one lost during Sandy, and a concrete retaining wall helps keep sand in a new dune system from washing away during large storm surges. The Dutch-inspired approach to resiliency planning is gaining traction in other U.S. cities. Across the Hudson River in Hoboken, New Jersey, one of the most innovative flood projects in the U.S. is underway. Unlike East River Park, Hoboken's implemented not just flood walls and sewer upgrades, but also has park spaces that can hold and absorb excess water. This makes the city much better prepared to handle storm surges and the increasingly common rain bombs due to climate change. New York State is, without a doubt, one of the cornerstones of American civilization, so it's hard to believe that this region's served by a decaying railway system. The Northeast Corridor is the longest electrified rail corridor, spanning up to 8 states from Washington, D.C. to New York to Boston. This 457-mile-long corridor is utilized by both passenger and freight, as well as intercity travelers, serving 17% of the U.S. population. Dubbed the busiest railway line in the country, it supports more than 2,000 trains with 800,000 daily passengers. The portion of the Northeast Corridor between Newark, New Jersey and Penn Station is 10 miles long and carries over 200,000 daily on Amtrak and NJ Transit passenger trips. It has only 2 tracks which support approximately 450 trains, while a majority of the remainder of the Northeast Corridor has 4. The 2 tracks mean that there's a traffic bottleneck in one of the most vital arteries of the region. Picture this: if even one of those tubes under the Hudson River becomes unoperational, it'll cause a $16 billion loss to the nation's GDP and add 30 minutes of travel time in an already congested railway station. At this point, it's very much in America's interest to make travel fast and headache-free in such an essential economic region. The Gateway program will replace and update rail infrastructure assets that, in many cases, are over 100 years old. The 2-track rail line used by Amtrak and NJ Transit Rail Operations, NJT, has reached its full capacity of 24 trains per hour. To increase the railway capacity of this section of the corridor, there are several expansions planned. This includes 1. A new tunnel under the Hudson River, 2. Stabilizing the existing 100-year-old tunnel under the Hudson, 3. New tracks and platforms to be placed on Penn Station in New York, 4. Replacing the Portal Bridge and Sawtooth Bridges in New Jersey. These modifications and several others come at a staggering cost of $16.1 billion. But this price tag seems to be worth it, as this project will reduce travel time, inject $85 million a month into the economy, and create 72,000 jobs. The construction will also utilize U.S. suppliers and manufacturers. More than just stimulating the economy, the Gateway program will eliminate 2 million tons of CO2 from the air. In the beginning, New York and New Jersey were going to divide the project expense, but luckily they'll be saving a few bucks as the government stepped in. As of now, the majority of the expenses will be covered by the federal government. Under the Infrastructure Act, the project received an additional $3.8 billion.
Today's 3.8 infusion follows other funds I announced previously and brings the federal total to over $11 billion.
Consequently, both New York and New Jersey only have to contribute 15% to the Gateway program. The project was proposed in 2011, but it took nearly a decade to convince politicians and federal agencies to fund this cause. In 2021, it was formally approved by the federal government. Work officially began in 2023, although the completion is set for 10 to 12 years later. The first phase of construction includes creating a 2-track tunnel under the Hudson River and replacing the obsolete Portal North Bridge with an elevated one. Let's start with the existing tunnel under the Hudson River called the North River Tunnel. The North River Tunnel is in a desperate need of renovation, not just because it was built in 1910, but also because it was heavily damaged in 2012 by Superstorm Sandy. The intense flooding filled the tunnel with millions of gallons of salt water, which led to disabled trains, signal malfunctions, and delays. The magnitude of this damage created an urgency for its speedy refurbishment. In May 2014, Amtrak stated that within 20 years, one or both of the tunnels would have to be shut down, as they are more or less operating at full capacity. The Pennsylvania Railroad started construction in 1903, and it was open to the people in November 1910. The tunnel was considered state-of-the-art by the standards of the 20th century, but not so much now. It's a simple one-track in, one-track out system connecting New York and New Jersey. The tunnel was created using cast iron tubes, and they lie 20 feet below the riverbed and sill. The neglected walls are unable to stop the saltwater from intruding into the tunnel. The continuous leaking of saltwater has damaged the concrete, which is now falling apart. Inside the tunnel, 2 bench walls run on both sides. These bench walls are also corroding. It's important to note that the bench wall has ducts that store the power cables that serve the trains and Penn Station. The final nail in the coffin was Superstorm Sandy. It left behind a large residue of salt on the cement walls, decomposing them over time and eroding the copper cables. As such, there's very limited flexibility when incidents occur in the tunnel. The new 2-track tunnel will be constructed between Bergen Palisades in New Jersey to Manhattan. So now instead of 1 tunnel, you got 2 tunnels under the Hudson River. Just like the North River Tunnel, the Portal North Bridge is also more than a century old and in dire need of replacement. It's a movable swing span bridge that crosses over the Hackensack River, taking trains into and out of New York. Being a critical link of the Northeast Corridor, it carries 450 Amtrak and NJ Transit trains each day. Due to age and fragility, trains are restricted to a maximum of 60 miles an hour over the bridge. As it is movable, it can open and close to allow maritime traffic to pass through. However, its electrical and mechanical components malfunction often, delaying the opening and closing of the trains. That's why engineers thought it would be best replaced by a modern, more reliable fixed-span bridge. The new bridge would be much higher over the water, allowing boats to pass underneath without the need to open and close. It'll have higher speeds along with increased capacity and save millions of dollars in maintenance costs. In the same fashion, a second bridge called the Portal South Bridge will stand alongside the North Bridge. The South Bridge will also feature a 4-track like the rest of the Northeast Corridor. Phase 1 also includes the construction of a concrete casing on the west side of Manhattan and Hudson Yards to preserve the right-of-way for the future tunnel to Penn Station in Manhattan. Interestingly, before the Gateway project was even a thing, a similar project called Access to the Region's Core was being pitched. Although the idea was scrapped, this plan similarly aimed to create a new tunnel, a new rail yard, and a subway. A new station adjacent to the New York Penn Station was to be constructed as running more trains into the current station was deemed unfeasible. An estimated budget for the project was $8.7 billion. Construction began in mid-2009 and the project was slated for completion in 2018. But in a shocking turn of events, it was canceled by Chris Christie, the governor of New Jersey, who cited the possibility of cost overruns and the state's lack of funds. But what's sadder is that $600 million had already been spent on that project. This decision remains controversial till today. The future phases of the Gateway program will replace and expand the Sawtooth bridges on the Penn Station in Manhattan. In late 2023, Amtrak, in coordination with New Jersey Transit, began the procurement process for the Sawtooth Bridge's replacement. This replacement program will preserve and expand its capacity. The new bridge will feature a 4-track structure which will double the capacity in one of the most congested and complex locations on the corridor where these different services all come together. The Federal Railroad Administration, FRA, recently awarded this project up to $133.32 million in grant funding to support early construction activities. The Sawtooth bridges are owned by Amtrak and are used by 400-plus trains a day belonging to the New Jersey Transit, PATH, and Conrail freight train. In addition, Penn Station's also due for a multi-million-dollar overhaul. It's one of the busiest transit stations in the world, seeing an average of 650,000 visitors passing through its halls on a daily basis. Its 21 tracks accommodate approximately 1,300 train movements each weekday. The reconstructions needed to correct the substandard conditions experienced by hundreds of thousands of customers at Penn Station. The project will add at least 9 new tracks to the station, increase the number of entrances, and provide more accessibility options. Moreover, new platforms, railroad systems, passenger concourses, underground connections, and support services will be added to the station. Overall, this expansion will allow more than a doubling of peak-hour passenger trains once future capacity improvements are constructed. Another target of the Gateway program is the Dock Bridge. It crosses the Passaic River in Newark, New Jersey. Made operational in 1935, this 90-year-old structure is in for repair. Since it's a movable bridge, the plan is to convert it to a fixed bridge to reduce delays. The project would also repair the bridge's steel and concrete, and remediate and repaint its structure. Officials at the Gateway Development Commission have publicly stated that by 2038, they'll have finished digging and constructing the new tunnels and then rehabilitating the 2 existing Trans-Hudson tubes. However, the audit performed by the U.S. Department of Transportation's Transit Administration shows that this work will likely take until 2040. The complicated geography of the Hudson River poses a challenge to human ambitions and requires substantial prep work. Despite the setbacks, the Gateway program was a much-needed step towards streamlining travel in a region that contributes almost 20% to the GDP and hosts 97 of the 500 Fortune companies. It's a critical element of the nation's transportation network, linking millions of people to good jobs and connecting this region with the rest of the country. Imagine New York City with an extra 1,760 acres at its southern tip. This is the bold vision of Rutgers professor Jason Barr, who aims to combat rising sea levels while providing 180,000 new homes for 247,000 people. The new land, called New Manhattan, harks back to the island's original indigenous name. This isn't the first expansion in Lower Manhattan's history. Approximately 29% of Manhattan, about 3,000 acres, exists due to land reclamation. The borders of New York City have changed many times, particularly in Lower Manhattan along the Hudson and East River shorelines. Lower Manhattan has expanded for various reasons, including incremental land encroachments by private entities, major municipal projects like the creation of Battery Park, efforts to encounter the exodus to Upper New York which harmed downtown businesses, economic incentives due to the high value of NYC real estate, and the need to enhance resilience against land erosion and climate change impacts. City leaders and engineers stress that a climate resiliency plan is crucial. Without action, much of Lower Manhattan could become unusable. A risk assessment found that 70% of Lower Manhattan's shoreline needs infrastructure improvements, including flood defenses extending into the East River. Areas between the Brooklyn Bridge and the Battery are particularly vulnerable. Could expanding Lower Manhattan also address the city's housing shortage? Absolutely. New York City faces a severe shortage of affordable housing, reshaping local demographics and culture in real time. Gentrification, while also criticized, also brings benefits like a more stable economy, reduced crime rates, and increased local revenues, which can fund public services and infrastructure improvements. New York City continues to attract immigrants, with over 45,000 migrants arriving in the past year alone. This influx strains the city's shelter system and sparks policy conflicts between New York and Washington. Expanding Lower Manhattan could provide much-needed housing and space for services and infrastructure to support economically disadvantaged residents. And the best part is, we already know this works. Consider this timeline that depicts the expansion and growth of Lower Manhattan in both size and worldwide dominance. In 1699, the old Dutch Wall was removed to make way for Wall Street. By 1825, Lower Manhattan had fewer than 170,000 people and lacked a regular police force or trained fire department. From 1869 to 1883, the Brooklyn Bridge, the first to use steel for cables, linked Manhattan and Brooklyn. In 1863, the British built dirt platforms at the southern tip of the island for military defense. They did it again in 1735, calling it the Copsey Battery. The remains of Fort George, also known as Amsterdam, were used to expand the battery in 1788. Castle Clinton was built on a small artificial island just off the shore. Construction began in 1808 and the fort was finished in 1811. Though they kept making changes through the 1820s. Starting in 1855, the battery was mostly created by landfill using dirt from street widening projects in Lower Manhattan. This connected Castle Gardens Island to the mainland of Manhattan. The original shoreline is now roughly the modern park's eastern boundary at State Street. In the 1960s and 70s, landfill was used to create the 92 acres that make up Battery Park City. The first 24 acres were built on 1.2 million cubic yards of material from the construction of the original World Trade Center. More fill came from other projects like the New York City Water Tunnel and the dredging of Kill Van Kull. The East River waterfront has shifted over the years, moving to Water Street in 1730, then to Front Street in 1780, and finally to South Street by 1800. In 2013, then-Mayor Michael Bloomberg proposed a project called Seaport City, envisioned as a development similar to Battery Park City. This project aimed to revitalize the area around the South Street seaport. 6 years later, in 2019, Bloomberg's successor, Bill de Blasio, introduced a plan to address the increasing threats of climate change. This plan included creating up to 500 feet of new land extending from South Street to the East River, south of the Brooklyn Bridge. The objective was to protect South Street Seaport and the financial district from potential damage caused by rising sea levels and severe weather events. In 2021, the City of New York unveiled the Financial District Seaport Fit a Seaport Resilience Plan. This ambitious initiative targets a 0.9-mile stretch of shoreline in Lower Manhattan, known for its complexity and vulnerability. This plan includes constructing floodwalls, floodgates, pumps, and other advanced water management systems to handle tidal flows, flooding, and stormwater. The construction will extend between 90 and 200 feet into the East River, providing a robust protection against future climate-related threats. Gansevoort Peninsula, now part of the Meatpacking District at the northern end of Greenwich Village, was originally a spit of land extending into the Hudson River. The North Battery, an artillery installation, was built there between 1808 and 1811 and was connected to Hubert Street by a bridge and jetty. In 1812, Fort Gansevoort was completed between Gansevoort Street and West 12th Street. In 1837, landfill was used to create 13th Avenue. West Washington Market was established in 1887. New York City faced a unique challenge and addressed it by removing a block of land created by the 1837 landfill, which had extended Manhattan to 13th Avenue. This controversial move involved condemning many businesses, but the city could not condemn the West Washington Street Market, which remained as a landfill. The market eventually closed, and the dock was converted into a sanitation facility for loading garbage barges headed towards the Fresh Kills landfill. The only part of 13th Avenue that survived was behind this facility. In 2016, the city started demolishing the Department of Sanitation building to make way for a new public park. Little Island at Pier 55 is just to the north of this area. In 1911, Canadian-American engineer Kennard Thompson proposed an expansive plan called a Really Greater New York. His vision included expanding Lower Manhattan into Governor's Island, which was undergoing land reclamation to create New Manhattan. He also proposed creating new islands in Lower New York Bay and altering rivers. One of his goals was to stop the northward expansion, which he believed harmed downtown businesses. Over the years, Thompson refined his idea and formed the Manhattan Extension Corporation in 1921, supported by prominent figures like former judge and presidential candidate Alton B. Parker and artist Walter Russell. Thompson continued to advocate for his vision throughout his life. A century later, Vishant Chakrabarty, a professor at Columbia's University Center for Urban Real Estate, proposed a similar idea. He suggested using landfill to connect Lower Manhattan and Governor's Island, creating a new neighborhood called LoLo, Lower Manhattan. While this proposal highlighted benefits, it also faced challenges such as high costs, strict regulations on building with landfill, and potential environmental impacts. In 2015, author John Methvin revisited the proposal in The Awl, humorously dubbing the new borough Frankenborough. In 2022, Rutgers University urban economist Jason Barr proposed the New Manhattan Project, continuing the vision of expanding Manhattan. However, this idea faced criticism, particularly from Willie Blackmore and Curbed, who raised environmental concerns about the proposal. New York City's survival and growth hinge on how well its 520-mile coastline is protected. In the past, rapid port development dramatically changed the coastline's topography, with dredging to make way for bulkheads and piers to facilitate shipping. Much of the city's coastline lacks purpose-built defenses against high tides or storm surges. Instead, there are sandy beaches used for recreation that have been supplemented with sand to replace erosion losses. Until recently, the city's natural coastal areas and wetlands have been underutilized, failing to provide crucial protection where inland buffers and other structures could have played a significant role in strengthening the coastline. Hurricane Sandy struck the Battery in Lower Manhattan, generating a massive surge that created a storm tide over 14 feet above mean lower low water. The surge overwhelmed beaches, boardwalks, and bulkheads, eventually flooding the streets of Lower Manhattan. Projections indicate that such scenarios will become more frequent and intense as climate change produces more erratic and unpredictable weather. The Manhattan Island Extension Project aims to provide near and long-term solutions to enhance the area's climate resilience. The goal is to fortify the coastline, reducing the hazards posed by climate change and land exposure in Lower Manhattan by the 2050s and 2100. Tools being discussed for this project are deployable protection, flip-up barriers, parallel stormwater system, raised edge, sea level rise protection, elevated esplanade, raised edge, surge protection in some areas, seepage barrier. The project's goal is to prevent floodwaters from coming directly inland from the ocean, reduce water surges over beaches and bulkheads, and prevent flooding of neighborhoods and critical infrastructure such as tunnels. This initiative, aside from saving New York City, aims to provide robust protection against future climate-related threats. If the plan to significantly increase land in Lower Manhattan moves forward, the next crucial question is how best to utilize this new space. It'll likely require voter and legislative support to ensure some of this land is allocated for low to medium income housing and multi-use spaces for the homeless and migrant population. Expensive housing prices in large metropolitan areas are not just a New York City issue. Cities like San Francisco, Seattle, Boston, and D.C. also face affordable housing shortages due to changing urban economics. From millennials to Zoomers, many professionals prefer urban lifestyles over suburban living, at least until they start families. Refurbished brownstones, new condos, townhomes, and luxury apartments are prevalent in the Lower Manhattan real estate market, providing a significant economic boost through dining, retail, sports, and entertainment industries. However, it's clear that more affordable living spaces are needed, even if not directly in downtown areas, at least within city limits. This would allow people to stay close to employment and city amenities. If the plans for 1,760 acres of reclaimed land materialize, providing 180,000 new homes for 247,000 people, it'd be a missed opportunity if affordable housing isn't included. It's exciting to think that the solution to harden NYC's coastal land could also address the city's overcrowded and expensive housing market. The looming threat of climate change is upon us, but so is the challenge of housing a growing population critical to NYC's survival. Everything that makes New York City special is based on the wide diversity of its population, and it's essential that all residents continue to enjoy the Big Apple. New York City's finally undergoing a massive architectural revolution. New York has always been world famous for its iconic skyline, which includes Art Decos like the Chrysler Building and Empire State Building, and revolutionary designs like the World Trade Center. While all these structures have their place in history, a new generation of skyscrapers is threatening to overshadow them in the not-so-distant future. Here are 6 skyscrapers that'll completely transform the look and feel of NY. Number 1. 270 Park Avenue. It's a 1,388-foot tall skyscraper under construction in Midtown Manhattan in New York City. This state-of-the-art building will serve as the new headquarters of J.P. Morgan, the largest bank in the U.S. 270 Park Avenue will replace the old HQ Union Carbide building that served as the company's headquarters since the 1980s. In 2018, it was announced that the former Union Carbide building would be demolished to build a tower twice as tall. The new building will span up to 60 stories and will provide space for 14,000 employees. It's designed by Foster Plus Partners, the firm behind legendary structures like the Hearst Tower, London City Hall, and Apple Park. There are 24 massive columns at the base, which will support a lobby measuring about 80 feet high. The lifted base will create more outdoor space on the ground level on Park and Madison Avenues, which the studio plans to complement with a public plaza and green spaces. To secure approvals for the tower, the New York City Council dictated J.P. Morgan to spend $40 million for improving the district's condition and building a 10,000-square-foot public plaza in front of the tower. This will give Park and Madison Avenues 2.5 times as much ground-level outdoor space. It'll include enlarged walkways equipped with natural vegetation and services for neighborhood residents, workers, and regular guests. Talking about the overall design, the tower consists of several vertical columns of differing lengths pressed together to form a step structure. The interior will feature 2.5 million square feet of working space along with a food hall, a penthouse conference center, and a fitness center. All this will come at a hefty price tag of $3 billion. The outstanding thing about this building is that it's going to run entirely on hydroelectricity. This makes it the biggest all-electric tower in New York, combined with the fact that it'll have zero net emissions. Foster Plus Partners claimed that 97% of the building materials were recycled during construction. Over 3 years, more than 93,600 tons of U.S.-made and fabricated steel, 93% of which is recycled. The old building was demolished between 2019 and 2022, making it the tallest building to be voluntarily demolished. The previous record was held by the Singer Building, one of the earliest skyscrapers in Manhattan that was later demolished in 1968. To build such a large building, J.P. Morgan had to purchase hundreds of thousands of square feet of air rights from the nearby St. Bart's Church and MSD Capitol. Initially, 270 Avenue was supposed to be even taller, with a planned height of 1,400 feet. However, such a length requires deeper foundations that could interfere with the Grand Central Terminal that's directly beneath the tower and the East Side access tunnels. By late September 2023, construction had reached the 4th of the 5 tiers. The steel skeleton of the tower is complete, and the last beam was placed in November 2023. The whole project slated for completion in 2025. Until the tower is finished, J.P. Morgan and its employees are using 383 Madison Avenue as temporary office space. During the building period alone, the project will create more than 8,000 construction jobs across 40 local unions. The tower's construction injected $2.6 billion into New York City's economy. However, the design of the new headquarters is not without its share of criticism, particularly about its base columns. Architectural critic Alexandra Lang described the building as a son of Hearst Tower grafted on top of creepy legs, while others drew comparisons between the base columns to that of the ballerina's toes. But that's just their opinion, isn't it? Number 2. Commodore Tower on 175 Park Avenue. This tower's design is limited to paper only, but if realized, it can be the 3rd tallest building in New York City after the World Trade Center and Affirmation Tower. Towering up to 1,575 feet, 175 Park Avenue will be a super tall neighbor of the Grand Central Terminal. It's intended to replace the Grand Hyatt Hotel owned by former President Donald Trump. The 26-story Grand Hyatt is 290 feet tall, but its successor will be grander, offering 2.2 million square feet of space for office. a new 500-room hotel, retail, and 25,000 square feet of publicly accessible terraces. As far as the design's concerned, it'll have a tapered shape that'll be set back in 4 tiers. This tapered design's a nod to the old skyscrapers in New York, and it'll allow more light to reach the street. Glass and steel columns will run parallel on the outer skin of the tower, encasing its stone-clad core. At the base and the very top, these same columns will crisscross each other to form a beautiful lattice pattern. The elevated public plaza along the eastern side of the property can be accessed by an outdoor staircase along East 42nd Street. The main lobby will feature a soaring atrium guarded by the triangular glass facade, allowing unobstructed views of Lexington Avenue and East 42nd Street. Notice how the huge steel framework over the lobby resembles a giant metallic hand trying to swallow the building. Proposed by Skidmore, Owings & Merrill, or SOM, the new tower is set to solve the congestion on the pavement and build a clear path between 175 Park Avenue and the nearby Grand Central Terminal. In return for building this behemoth, the developers will spend hundreds of millions of dollars on new transportation infrastructure, including improvements to Grand Central Terminal, a new subway entrance on 42nd Street, and other public realm improvements. An additional $5 million would be set aside for local nonprofit organizations and promoting art in the area. 175 Park Avenue will be located adjacent to the iconic Chrysler Building, which will no doubt be overwhelmed by the scale of the new skyscraper. The Chrysler's building is just over 1,000 feet tall and gracefully reminiscent of New York's past. While the silhouette of both buildings is similar, the Chrysler Building's slim and needle-like proportions give it an air of elegance unknown to the new generation of skyscrapers. To be fair to the new skyscrapers, they're made bulky as the prospective tenants demand larger floor plans to accommodate office, retail, and wellness facilities. Not to mention that New York remains the blue-eyed boy for many startups, businesses, and talented professionals. So the demand for spacious and cutting-edge high-rise developments isn't going away anytime soon. Moreover, the 2017 Midtown East Zoning Initiative also encouraged bulky structures like the One Vanderbilt, 270 Park Avenue, which we just discussed, and the future 350 Park Avenue to come into existence. For the tower to truly absorb its surroundings, it'll incorporate elements from its surroundings. For example, the skyscraper's use of stone and visual symmetry echoes the vibe of the Grand Central Terminal Station. One of the challenges of this mega project is that it sits directly over some of the subway lines of the Grand Central Station. That's why the demolition process has to be carried out carefully, in addition to improving the layout of the underground train station. 3 new public terraces offering seating, food, and drink options will be built around the skyscraper, accessed via staircases and escalators. One of them, called the Chrysler Terrace, will allow visitors to have Instagram-worthy pictures of the vintage Chrysler Building. The developers RXR Realty and TF Cornerstone acquired the site in 2019. In late 2021, the project gained approval from the New York City Council. However, the initial height of 1,642 feet has slashed to the current 1,575 feet. Nevertheless, it's still enough to surpass Central Park Tower in New York. It's expected the construction will commence in 2026 and will be completed by either 2029 or 2030. Number 3, Tower 5th. This is another proposed tower at Midtown Manhattan. The developer, Harry Macklowe, first revealed plans for this 1,556-foot tall tower in 2019. This means that it'll only be a few feet shorter than 175 Park Avenue, crowning it as the 4th tallest building in New York. Its proposed location is directly north of St. Patrick Cathedral, wedged between Madison Avenue and 5th Avenue. Gensler is the design architect for the building. Harry Macklowe finalized the $44 million purchase of this particular site in 2019. The tower will enclose 960,000 square feet of office space, as well as shops, a food hall, and an auditorium. At the top of the tower, the city's highest observatory will offer unprecedented views, as well as unique experimental, cultural, and entertainment experiences. On the ground floor, there will be an 85-foot lobby that will secure the life-size view of St. Patrick's Cathedral. There's nothing out of the ordinary about the outside appearance of the tower, except the narrow pedestal on which it stands. The pedestal rises nearly 400 feet above the street, higher than the spires in the nearby cathedral. The very top of the skyscraper reminds us of the wooden Jenga tower. What do you think it resembles? Give your opinion in the comments. Okay, so the reason it looks like this is it'll have a sky lobby on the 40th floor. Its observation deck, called the Sky of the Americas, will sit 1,451 feet high, making it the highest such attraction in the United States and the second highest in North America. Each floor offers 19,800 gross square feet of space without any column and a line of windows, much like the fenestration of 432 Park Avenue. A restaurant sandwiched between the upper blocks will be encased by floor-to-ceiling glass. Imagine eating your lunch at such a height with a whole skyline of New York in front of you. A nerve-wracking experience for sure. Other features include a retail and food market in the cellar levels, an atrium that spans the whole height, expansive seating areas, and a 3-story auditorium. The tower itself will be wrapped in an energy-efficient closed-cavity facade system to reduce solar heat gain by over 70%. It'll be the first deployment of this type of system in North America. The next part isn't for the faint-hearted. There will be a protruding glass plate, almost like the skywalk at Grand Canyon. 2 small buildings, one of them being the Venezuelan consulate, will be demolished to free up space for the tower. But let's keep in mind, securing approval for this mega project would be a lengthy struggle. Its proximity to 5 landmark buildings, including Rockefeller Center and St. Patrick's Cathedral, bring Macklowe's project into clash with the Landmarks Preservation Commission. Additionally, if the project's to go forward, Macklowe would have to transfer air rights from St. Patrick's. Since Tower 5th is planned to be 66% larger than current zoning allows, Macklowe will require special permits, zoning approvals, and zoning changes to execute the project. If the project gets the green light, it'll no doubt refine the skyline of the city. Number 4. 15 Penn Plaza. This is a planned office tower to be constructed by Vornado Realty Trust on 7th Avenue between 32nd and 33rd Streets in Midtown Manhattan. It'll be a 57-story skyscraper, reaching up to an incredible length of 1,270 feet. Designed by Foster Plus Partners, it'll yield 2.7 million square feet of office space and stand as the centerpiece of the 7.4 million square foot Penn District Master Plan. This redevelopment aims to transform and revitalize the area between 6th and 7th Avenues and West 32nd and West 34th Streets with a total of 8 new buildings. In a nutshell, the overall appearance of the tower makes it look like a chest of drawers. But if you start to look closer, that's truly where you can admire its grandeur. The latest renderings show 9 cantilevering volumes topped with landscape terraces on the western elevation. The northern face is lined with steel beams and metal paneling, with 3 vertical window columns. The rendering also showcases the tower's relative height to that of the Empire State Building. 15 Penn's top tenants have the advantage of a 360-degree view of lower Manhattan's skyline in New York Harbor. The lobby's futuristic design fits a skyscraper of the 21st century. The lobby's high ceilings enclosed by an equally tall glass frame overlooking the street. It looks even more majestic at night as the light from the inside shines on the outside pavement. The main lobby is as spacious as a shopping mall with 4 escalators to facilitate people's movement. The updated design shows a different version of the tower's crown. The old design consists of an extension covered with horizontal metal grills. The new version replaces glass with metal, so you'll see rectangular glass boxes stacked on top of each other. The extensive use of glass gives a very sophisticated energy to Penn 15 and makes it appear lighter and hence less bulky. Penn 15 will be divided into 5 tiers that encompass several office floors that would be serviced by its own set of express elevators. The highest office level will be 1,165 feet high on the 61st level. A total of 27 landscape terraces will be found on varying heights on the building's spine. It almost looks like a vertical farm from afar. In that way, it stands out from the rest of the monolithic structures dominating the region. While the project seems great, there is only one bad outcome. To build this 1,270-foot tower, Hotel Pennsylvania had to be razed to the ground. The demolition of this century-old hotel is almost complete. During its heyday, Hotel Pennsylvania was once one of the largest hotels in the world, with 2,200 furnished rooms. The hotels hosted top-notch celebrities and politicians of its time, like Fidel Castro and Duke Ellington. Vornado Realty Trust bought the hotel back in 1990, and in 2008 it was given the status of a landmark. After fierce and unsuccessful preservation battles, the 22-story hotel was finally demolished in July 2023. Construction of the tower is postponed as of now, and Vornado is considering using the site of fashion shows or other temporary use. The tower's construction has also been postponed in the past due to low office market rents. Undoubtedly, this has made some people angry who were against the demolition of the historic hotel. To be fair, it appears to them it was destroyed to build a commercial tower whose plan still hangs in the air. If construction goes ahead, Penn 15 would cost a whopping $1.3 billion, or even possibly more depending on how much it gets delayed. Number 5. Affirmation Tower. This tower comprises of 5 rectangular boxes that grow in size as they climb upward to its 1,663-foot mark. Given its upside-down step design, it gives the illusion that it might tip over on a windy day. Designed by award-winning architect Sir David Adage, his designs tend to incorporate bizarre shapes into a neat and sleek design. If approved, Affirmation Tower would be built on Site K, 1 block from the High Line, Hudson Yards, and New York City's No. 7 subway line. But the thing that sets it apart from others is that it would be New York's first mixed-use building developed. built and funded by Black and female-owned businesses. The project's partners agreed that they'd give more than 30% of construction work to minority and female contractors, totaling more than $1 billion. The Affirmation Tower is expected to hire more than 30,000 New Yorkers over 6 years, including 15,000 permanent jobs, bringing in more than $5 billion in new tax revenue for the city and state over 30 years. The tower will feature almost every amenity that a modern high-rise would have. An entertainment complex, a rooftop eatery, 2 hotels, a ballroom, an observation deck, and guess what? Even a skating rink. It'll house quite a few commercial businesses, making Affirmation a destiny for hospitality, retail, and commercial businesses. Affirmation Tower was shaping up to be the tallest building in the Western Hemisphere, but the architect and developer held back for one specific reason. Out of respect for the people who lost their lives in the 9/11 attacks, Affirmation Tower was made slightly shorter by spire height than One World Trade Center. Let's examine the exterior more closely. The tower goes 90 stories up with white vertical fins spanning each of the 5 boxes. Behind these fins, there's a floor-to-ceiling glass wall separating the building from the outside environment. Upon closer inspection, you'll see that the top 3 units are equipped with landscape terraces. The rooftop's also enhanced by adding lush vegetation and closed by the extension of the white fins. The ice skating rink would be available in the winter months. Here, residents and non-residents can skate their way along with bonus views of the Hudson Yards. The main entrance also shows the same parallel line pattern consistent with the rest of the tower's body. It'll be positioned along 11th Avenue, while a separate entrance for the observatory will be located on the other side of the ground floor. The Affirmation Tower would be a $3.5 billion addition to Hudson Yards skyline. Number 6. 525th Avenue. We had purposefully left the most glamorous skyscraper for the last. 525th Avenue is also a mixed-use building under construction in Midtown Manhattan. It may not be the tallest out of all the structures that we discussed, yet it still has a decent height of 1,000 feet. The 76-story structure will span 415,000 square feet and yield 98 condominium units and commercial space spread across the ground floor and 4 cellar levels. Its design's unique from the grid window pattern seen in most tall buildings. The tower will feature arched windows repeating along the entire length of the tower. The front view sketches show landscape terraces at varying heights along the facade. The ground floor entrance plays with the same details of arch columns, and the building's address is shown embedded into the sidewalk in interlocking numerals at the foot of the main doors. The arch details of the exterior wall were inspired by the New York Public Library and Grand Central Terminal. The site of the skyscraper was formerly occupied by 3 buildings, 516 and 518 Fifth Avenue, and an office building at the 525th Avenue address. Not to mention that this tower is going to be very close neighbors with the Empire State Building and the World Trade Center to the south. The building's efficiently sized layouts will have retail and dining establishments on near and street level, offices on floors 5 to 28, and residences on floors 31 to 69. There will be no more than 4 residences per floor, and some of them will have open-air terraces. Many residents can enjoy views of Rockefeller Center, St. Patrick's Cathedral, the Chrysler Building, and the United Nations Secretariat Building. For the amenity package, there will be a swimming pool, spa, fitness center, and a restaurant. The development firm behind this project, Rabina, closed on a $540 million construction package to complete 525th Avenue. Recent photographs show the skyscraper nearing the 1/3 mark, followed closely behind by the installation of its facade. 525th Avenue's completion date is posted on the construction board for June 1st, 2026. That's it for today. We hope you enjoyed our video. Which is the best tower in your opinion? Comment your thoughts below. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons. We're committed to releasing 2 videos each week, so your support means a lot, and we'll see you in the next video.